Hello, this is Nick from Terminus, and this is the start of the series Let's Listen to Darkness Surrounds Me, where we're going to listen to Darkness Surrounds Me. So I have Reaper open, and we're going to listen to the actual project, like the raw audio of that album, and we're going to be able to isolate some tracks and hear some cool things that you don't really notice when you listen to the album because there's so much in there and it's hard to focus on everything at once. I figured what better place to start than the start of the album, the song that started it all, Call of the Void. So even though this is the start of the album, it's actually one of the last songs I wrote for it. The album was originally going to be just 8 songs, being the other 8 songs. So I was going to start with Hidden in the Depths, and then I had planned to add something to the beginning of it, like maybe a keyboard effect or something like that, just so it's not so harsh at the beginning like it is right now. But then I ended up getting the idea for this song, and I figured I didn't have much space to put it in the album anywhere else, so I would make it the intro, and then it'll just naturally segue into Hidden in the Depths anyway, and kind of kill two birds with one stone. So let's get started with it. We start with the keyboard part here, which just fades in. All that is just 4 octaves of F sharp. And then eventually this track comes in, which is just kind of outlining the chord progression. It adds a little bit of color to this intro here. And then I think probably one of the cooler parts of this intro is this little fade in right here on the rhythm guitars. So what that is, so originally that was written as to just be a normal fade in. So I was gonna play the chord and then fade it in as you do a lot. But the problem was that the chord was actually attenuating a lot faster than I expected it to. So like it was fading out faster than I expected it to. And so when I was fading it in, because it was naturally fading out like way faster than I wanted it to, it was sort of saying like stagnant in volume and it didn't sound very good. So I figured instead of fighting against that, what I could do was reverse the take. So what this actually is just the natural attenuation of the chord, but then played backwards. So I'll play it again. Yeah, so really the attack of the chord is actually here, and then it fades out this way, but we reversed it. So it sounds pretty cool, I think. But then this takes us to the actual main part of the song, which is the main guitar riff, the and that's actually when I said earlier how I got the idea for this song. This was actually the start of it. And what this is the speed of light is it's 2.9979 times 10 to the power of 8 meters per second in metric. And if that means nothing to you, that's fine. But the point is the numbers there are 29979. I don't know. I like to hear numbers as notes a lot of the time. So if you imagine those as scale degrees or whatever, it kind of creates a melody 29979. So listen to it again. It kind of outlines that same melody. And actually, it worked out that if you play those fret numbers 29979 on the high string of the guitar, that's where this riff came from. And then of course the 2 is actually a 7 on the next string lower, which is the exact same note, but it just makes it easier to play. But yeah, that pretty much is the riff, and then it continues with kind of other similar stuff, just following the scale. And because there's 5 notes in that sequence, I mentioned, so it creates a whole 5/8 time signature pattern, which is pretty cool. It really guides the song and kind of makes it more unbalanced in a way, but it really drives it forward. I think it wouldn't sound the same if it was a normal common time signature. So while that comes in, we got this rhythm guitar chord, which we heard a little bit of earlier. And then some feedback comes in on the left and then on the right in a second. Yeah, I bought a feedback pedal when I was recording this album, and am obsessed with it. You hear it a lot throughout because I think I don't know, it's really cool. So yeah, the first time we just got this, nothing else happens, and then we're gonna play through the riff again, but this time the band's gonna enter. The rest of the band, I guess. Drums and bass. So just kind of playing shots on the main beats and some fills and stuff like that. But you can still hear, sounds kind of odd because of that 5/8. And then in a second it's gonna go into a full beat. Other than that, there is this little keyboard part that enters. Pretty cool. So something about when you're writing in odd time signatures is sometimes the main melody sounds pretty good in it. So like this guitar part sounds good because it's in the odd time signature, but then trying to write counter melodies when it's in 5/8, it ends up kind of sounding wonky. So my philosophy here was to just lean into the wonk and let it be. I think listening to this isolated, it's really confusing to hear what is going on, where's the one and stuff, but you don't have to, it sounds good in context anyway, I think. And the full band comes in this time. Added in some, so these are now 3/8 bars instead of 5/8, so the last like 2/8 notes are cut off, and it just adds some, I think it adds some momentum, some energy to the song at these parts. I'll play back the rhythm guitar for this section as well. So the way I count this is kind of like I don't really think of it as 5 so much as like a long and a short. So like long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. And I think that's an approach a lot of people use for odd time signatures. Because I think when you start bringing numbers into things, it gets more confusing than it needs to be. And then we got to the fourth section, which the marker somehow got erased during the many times this file has been open, but there should be a marker here for the fourth section. So obviously every section we're introducing something, and either a new instrument or an instrument's getting more complicated, more interesting, and sometimes both. So here now, drums kind of change the beat, adds a bit more energy. The rhythm guitars also add some. Just more, more notes, more chugging, I guess. But then there's also this counter melody, which is the same. It's the same counter melody that we heard in the piano at in the second section. So this part, I believe, is that melody, and then this is a harmony of it. And then yeah, the main guitar is still going. Playing mostly the same thing. I think you hear there's some different notes in there just to keep things fresh. But then finally here, this is now, we're gonna change things up. At this point you've been hearing the same riff for almost a minute. You're probably sick of it. So let's hear it. The time signatures now are different, so we have like a 6/8 and then 5/8 alternating, which again sounds confusing, but if you just count it like a long, short, long, short, I think it makes it's a lot more intuitive. And then in terms of actually like what the guitar is playing, it's pretty similar to what was it before. Like we're still kind of noodling around with the same scale, but yeah, just a little bit different. These are now just playing octaves. So I like to, if the rhythm guitars are just playing something simple, which is kind of necessary a lot of times. So they're just power chords here. Add those octaves on top. They just add a bit more harmonic information, a little bit more color to the chord without kind of overpowering everything. So that's the way I harmonize things a lot of times when all you have is power chords because everything is so distorted. You don't want to have too many notes fighting with each other. But then here, probably my favorite part of this little FX. I'll play that one more time. It's like an impact thing. It really adds a lot to. I imagine this song is just sort of like expanding, expanding, expanding. So this is like a huge release of energy. Yeah, that's it without that. I think it loses a lot of personality. Yeah, and then it was about right here in the song when I realized that its whole purpose was to be an intro to the album, which means it's meant to segue into Hidden in the Depths. And I kind of got lost in this song, so I sort of shot myself in the foot because Hidden in the Depths, it's like completely different time signature. It's a little bit faster, and now this is in Hidden in the Depths is in like a G minor kind of thing, and Call of the Void is in F sharp minor, which are actually they even though they sound close together, they're very different. They don't use a lot of common notes. So I had to figure out how to actually transition there without, spending a bunch of times doing a bunch of weird key changes. So my solution to that was just to chain together a bunch of diminished chords so that they create so much dissonance in the mix in the song that eventually hearing anything that is not a diminished chord actually sounds pretty resolved, and then you have your transition pretty much. So that's what this sounds like. Just a bunch of diminished chords. And then, yeah, it sounds pretty resolved because you're sick of hearing diminished chords because they sound terrible. But of course, it's all in context. This is just now. Yeah. Yeah. And that's pretty much the song. Of course, that takes us to Hidden in the Depths, which we will talk about next time. So it's a fun little opener. Not too much else to say about it, but I think it's a good song to get you started in listening to the album. So I'll see you next time with Hidden in the Depths.